So I see a few people have joined us, and I'm going to give everybody just 2 minutes to file into their seats, and then we can dive into introductions. And I think, Laura, you're still on here. Please make sure you're admitting people.
What's that behind you, Nick, by the way?
It's a Hindu tanka.
Oh.
Thanks for noticing. Oh, great. Okay. Getting a nice group here. Just going to wait 30 more seconds, and then we'll get started. Yes, everybody.
Hi.
Okay, well, this is a nice group. It's a minute past. I'll make some introductory remarks before we dive in. But welcome, everybody, to the Art and Social Activism Online Festival. It will be taking place April 15th to the 30th. My name is Nicholas Cohn. I'm the festival director. And I want to thank our audience for logging in today, and our community of over 20,000 for encouraging us through responses and emails to transition the festival to an online format. Like most businesses, we were forced to cancel or postpone the physical edition of the Spring Art and Social Activism Festival. But after hearing from all of you and speaking with the Festival Advisory Committee, we collectively came to understand that the voices of our cultural partners, our social justice partners, could provide important information on this pandemic from a unique perspective and diverse viewpoints, and that the artists and designers and our wellness workshops could offer brief moments of escapism, joy, and relaxation during a period of high anxiety. We hope you'll join us over the next 3 weeks. Programs will be taking place on Zoom and then also on Instagram, and details about our programming can be found both on our website and Facebook pages. We open the festival today with our first of 3 weekly Wednesday town halls. Today we'll explore how COVID-19 is impacting the restaurant industry, the inspiring ways they are stepping up to support frontline workers, and what the future holds for the culinary industry. So I'm pleased to introduce our speakers for today. We have Vitus Spehar, V, and V is the Director of Impact at the James Beard Foundation, where they oversee a full suite of programs designed to increase the number of women leaders and owners across the culinary and hospitality fields. She also co-leads the foundation's efforts to build a more diverse and inclusive industry. We will also hear from Peter J. Kim. Peter is the founder of the Museum of Food and Drink, MoFad, which brings the world of food and food to life with exhibits which you can eat. And they are located in Brooklyn and recognized as a global leader in the experiential food education. Kim has received a bachelor's from Brown, a JD from the University of Pennsylvania, and holds a master's degree in sciences from Po, the Sorbonne in Paris. So thank you to both of you for taking the time. I know you're very busy schedules to speak with our community. We're going to jump right into things. first, maybe Peter, you're a member of the curatorial committee for the Spring Festival, and I thought at an interesting juxtaposition here, because you're both a cultural institution and representing the food industry. Both have been impacted so hard. Perhaps you could tell us about MoFad's mission and a recent exhibition that exemplifies the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, and hi, everybody, and thanks for having me. And I'll say, Nick, that I was really gutted the festival couldn't happen, having gotten a glimpse at some of the art that was on deck for being exhibited. So, but yeah, I'm glad that you're forging ahead with this. So the Museum of Food and Drink is it's a project that's near and dear to me. It's something that I have led the development of from scratch, starting in 2012. I had a kind of a moment where I realized that, curiously enough, there wasn't a museum anywhere in the world that really took a contemporary look at food and drink and used it as a lens for understanding culture, understanding history, science, economics, policy, and so on. We started actually with the support of chefs. One of the very first events we did was in Del Posto, and we had a bunch of chefs imagine future MoFad exhibitions through a menu. And so there was a dish inspired by the food of ancient Rome that was a giant ostrich that was roasted whole. And then we had Christina Tosi do a dish inspired by food on the space station. But the basic concept for MoFad is that it's a museum centered around the belief that food is culture. And it is, as such, a uniquely powerful tool for understanding ourselves, but also the world around us. And, it's a place where you can really sort of travel through time and around the world, understanding the people and processes behind what we eat and drink. Yeah. And so you can imagine the scope of MoFad's exhibitions being everything from Aztec food to space station food, the neuroscience of flavor to the inner workings of your digestive system, and so on.
I love how you also, you use design, the cartons, the tools, that are used to, and how they've evolved over the years for cooking. So it's really so much about art and design and decorative as well.
Oh yeah, there's so many facets, and I think to respond to your question about an exhibition that really exemplifies what we do. MoFad's bread and butter is really everyday food and drink, things that we encounter all of the time, and peeling back the sort of extraordinary stories from those very ordinary, seemingly ordinary foods. And so just examples of some things we've done. We did an exhibition on breakfast cereal, looking at the history behind it and how it started as a religious diet food and then became later a cure for masturbation and then became the sort of mass marketed product that we know today. We did an exhibition on flavor science and how it gave rise to the flavor industry, which now shapes the flavor of everything that we eat. And then the exhibition that I was most excited about was one that we were on the cusp of opening before COVID hit, and it was called African/American: Making the Nation's Table. And it really looked at the American table, what we eat and drink every day, and revealing the African Americans, the countless African American farmers, chefs, food and drink producers who actually laid the foundation for what we consider now to be American cuisine. It's a story that goes back to our country's inception, and it affects each and every one of us. It's shockingly unknown. Most people don't. When they think about African American food, they think often of soul food, but they don't necessarily think that it's something that applies to everybody. And in fact, that is the case. So started working on this exhibition conceptually about 7 or 8 years ago, and then in earnest about 3 years ago, I brought on my friend, Dr. Jessica B. Harris. Some of you might know of her, and she has been our lead curator for the exhibition. We recruited about 30 pretty phenomenal African-American chefs, scholars, and practitioners, and created an exhibition that I was so excited about. And, it's really crazy, but we were in the final stretches of completing the exhibition when we made the decision to postpone it. And so it is actually complete. It's at the Africa Center on the northeast corner of Central Park, and it's just sitting there waiting to be opened to the public.
Well, we look forward to when that
Yeah.
finally opens.
Yes.
But it is, you're really cutting a new path for the museum field and looking at the influence of food. I know you've launched a number of initiatives, though, to keep your community engaged. And perhaps you could share one or two of those. And then also for our followers, just your website so that people can learn more.
Yeah, so it's been interesting. Reacting to this, we had to consider meeting people's sort of day-to-day needs, but then also trying to give people something to look forward to and to focus on this larger narrative that is still, continues to be important, of recognizing Black contributions to this country. And then also balancing providing support for COVID-related needs, but then also giving people something to take their mind off of it as well. But we have, as many museums are doing, digital programs. We've done Q&As like this, but also cocktail classes. We have something where our chef will take ingredients that you have at home and help you create a dish. And then we're also putting out information about the exhibition on kind of a drip feed to continue providing recognition to Black contributions to American food.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to taking part in your cocktail making class webinar. So thank you. And now Vitus, I know you go by V, so just everyone, I'm going to be calling her V. V, I read on the James Beard Foundation website that the culinary industry generates $1 trillion in revenue per year, which accounts for 4% of our GDP, global domestic product. And then a deeper dive, I also, Americans for the Arts publishes the Arts and Economic Impact Report. And they noted that arts and culture make up another $760 billion, also amounting to approximately 4% of our GDP. So the arts and culture and culinary industries are a significant part of our economy, and two that have been incredibly impacted by COVID-19 and the mandatory shutdowns. As an organization representing the field, perhaps you could tell us what you're hearing. How has this pandemic impacted the restaurant industry on a local level, on a national level?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that comparison that you draw about arts and food being, essentially equal partners is so true, in the fact that even myself, like all little girls who want to end up in hospitality, began with a career in art and music. And so you'll find that being something, does one feed the other? We don't know, but they go together quite well. And it's something that as folks are home right now, they're realizing how much effort goes into cooking, how much effort goes into menu planning, how much cost goes in, how much talent it takes to execute that plate that we so quickly order up off an app, or, just stop in a restaurant, or any number of things. And so I think people are, on one side of this, people are gaining a more direct respect for the craft of culinary arts. And then on the other side, when you're not, making food or doing dishes, you're maybe listening to an online orchestra, or one of your friends is doing a show, or the drag queens are doing live shows. I mean, everybody out there is online right now, like coming truly and authentically into your home and saying, like, this is me, lights, camera, action.
Yes.
And we're all getting to connect much more deeply there. So I think in that way, that's something that no matter who you are, if you never thought this would happen to you, it's happening to you now. And when you're reaching out for comfort, you're not going to forget the places that you went, and it was to food and art, of course. And so I hope that continues to drive people's behaviors and mentality well after this, and I think that it will.
Yeah, where would isolation be without art and culture right now?
I know, right? I mean, all the Netflix shows, even commercial TV. Like I'm watching commercials for cars and seeing how they're handling the COVID crisis, like Uber, like businesses I don't even really care about. I'm like, what are you telling me about this? So I think we're all going to remember what that felt like. We're going to remember who was there for us. We're going to remember who wasn't. And we're going to make better choices as to where we spend our money when we get out of this.
Absolutely.
In the restaurant industry in particular, in addition to being $1 trillion of the GDP, we employ over 11 million people. And oftentimes, you know, in full-time capacities, part-time capacities, sometimes it's somebody's second job, it's their passion project, it's their home business, it's something they inherited. You're coming from literally everywhere. And 7 million of those 11 million were laid off in the first 2 weeks. And so you're looking at the majority.
So tell us a little bit about, I mean, we're hearing so much about government aid packages. But it's so confusing to many. How is that going towards the restaurant industry and the workers?
Yes. So we have the in-house capacity at Beard. We're running advocacy and we're partnering with like the IRC, the International or Restaurant Coalition, and our boot camp chefs to lobby Congress because the stimulus package is not acceptable truly for the restaurant industry. And so when we started this out, we were very hopeful that PPP would make sense. We were also very hopeful that this was only going to take a couple of weeks. We thought like, okay, maybe we'll be closed for 4 or 5 weeks. That sucks. That's catastrophic. But like when we reopen, these programs will work for us. And what we're seeing in restaurants is the level of cleaning that you need to do, we're not trained for. The safety that people need to feel, we're not trained for. And the ways that we were creating these menus before, we just can't get those ingredients anymore, right? Like it just isn't going to happen. So we've done 3 webinars now through the industry support webinars, which you can find information about at jamesbeard.org/relief. That has everything that I'll talk about today. And in each one, people are trying to make it work and we're realizing it's not. So instead of pushing it through anyway, what we've been doing is going back to our lobbyists and congressmen and folks who are on our side and saying to them in very clear terms, this is what needs to change with the CARES Acts. And those are fluid documents right now. I think people think because they passed, that's it. And it's not. Every single day, there are regulations that get applied to that stimulus. So even though the broad strokes are there, the regs are still coming in, and that's where we have an opportunity to change. So we're saying that 8-week period on PPP needs to start when the restaurant opens, not when they get the money. Like the $100 billion in grants needs to go to independent restaurants, not just major restaurant groups.
Right.
And we are seeing traction in that.
That's great. Absolutely. The small restaurants that we love so dearly don't need organizations like yourself to come together as a larger voice. So jamesbeardfoundation.org has some outlines about this. I urge everybody today to visit that. Continuing on, the impact on the restaurant industry we've noted has been quite devastating. But despite these setbacks, we're also seeing such inspiring ways that the restaurant field has responded and is stepping up. I see, for instance, there's an organization called Feed the Front Lines, or Frontline Food Trucks, which is delivering food to healthcare workers. People forget that the cafeterias in hospitals are closed, so they can't go to their normal places. They also don't even have the time to really take a break, so they need these packaged things. But can you speak, you and Peter, both perhaps, what are you seeing out there in terms of the inspiring ways that your field is helping us through this period?
Sure, Peter, you want to go first?
Oh yeah, I think probably the biggest silver lining I could see coming out of this is if there is something of a systems reset. I think anybody in the industry already has known for a while now that the whole industry was on these sort of rickety stilts, and it always felt that restaurants were always sort of one bad turn away from things going totally awry. And there's something wrong when restaurant owners are having a hard time turning a profit, restaurant workers feel they're underpaid, restaurant customers feel they're paying too much, farm workers are underpaid. You know, when there's these sort of problems running throughout the whole thing, I think there needs to be more of a look at what's wrong with the system here. And that's actually, I would say, even broader than the culinary industry, but just the whole thing has thrown a spotlight on inequality, has thrown a spotlight on the precariousness of a lot of aspects of our society that I think we kind of took for granted. So the biggest thing I can see happening out of this is that a lot of my chef colleagues and myself have really stepped up on the activism front and really advocating for policies because you know, I think there are things that people can do on an individual sort of atomic level, but really the solution here has to be a policy-driven one because it's just far bigger than anything one restaurant, one person can do.
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading about unfortunate amounts of food waste that are occurring because of supply chain issues and then lack of protective PPE equipment for delivery people, for instance. I mean, so which is part of this process of getting food to people who are being isolated. So, V, maybe you could share some of the initiatives that you've been seeing that are stepping up.
Yeah, my background, if anyone is in the DMV area or has ever heard of Hungry Harvest or Imperfect Produce, Misfits, stuff like that, I was on the original team for Hungry Harvest and built their Harvest RX program, which is still running to this day. And the thing about food waste is if you can't monetize it, you really can't motivate people to be as thoughtful about it. So the things that we had put in place at that time of like rescuing food from the system when it was surplus, redirecting it, being able to resell it, you're seeing those companies like Imperfect, Hungry Harvest, Misfits, those folks, they're barely able to take on new customers right now. So there's a certain amount of that home delivery product that is getting purchased. And the important part of that is farmers don't get paid unless the end retailer pays the bill. So in some cases, and we're directing a lot of our even house purveyors from the James Beard House to these institutions, you'll have, let's take Hungry Harvest, for example, we'll buy 40,000 pounds of sweet potatoes. They'll put 35,000 pounds in the boxes that get delivered to people's homes at an affordable rate, and the other 5 gets donated to either hospitals or food banks. They have this system in place to make those transfers, and that's how you actually reduce and monetize the waste. And so we're working a lot with those folks to amplify those programs. In addition, you see the Lee initiative is doing these pop-up kitchens all throughout the nation. Those are funded. We got Maker's Mark to come in, put down cash on these and say, okay, we're going to pay a chef and we're going to pay for their food. And they're going to make 250 meals a day that are going to serve out of work hospitality workers in particular, who are the folks that we've never been the ones who got the help, right? We're always the ones giving the help. Yeah. And at these stations, they're getting, feminine products, toilet paper, paper towels, diapers, and that's coming with the meal for the day. And so you're seeing people doing it in a really innovative way. But what we need to remember is there is a monetary piece to this. The third of it that I think is really important and that nobody is really talking about enough right now is when the president declared a national disaster state of emergency and all the states went state of emergency, that unlocked a certain amount of funding that goes to paying for the food. There's a couple other amenities that they get, but basically the food for hospitals, firefighters, police departments, EMTs. To get that money, it's such a weird thing. Chefs are literally just calling their local professional fire departments and they're saying, I can make you food. How many do you need? What's your budget? Because each one of those firefighters gets, I think it's like $7 or $8 per meal per day per whatever it is. Yeah. And so they're saying we've got 40 guys and gals fighting fires and this is what I've got for a budget. And they're getting their contracts literally old school cold calling people. So there's a couple organizations popping up now like Feed the Heroes DMV or Off Their Plate that are aggregating those funds and then they're sending out those contracts. There is money in feeding the front line and that is so important to...
Is that... Is that on your website? Because those grassroots really, I know our audience is made up of a lot of grassroots organizations and people that want to be involved in smaller initiatives where they can really see their impact. Is that information on the James Beard website,
Yes.
or is there some place you
Yes,
recommend?
you should be able to find that in the Chef Action Toolkit. If you
Chef
can't, you can
Action.
just email me directly. So if you go to jamesbeard.org/relief, that's where we're updating everything. It's a little bit messy because we're updating it like a couple times a day, so it might be hard to find. You can also just email me and I'll connect you directly to who's in your state, since y'all are maybe calling in from different places, at vspehar, SPEHAR, @jamesbeard.org, and I'll hook you up.
Yeah, and our organization's email has been readily available. So if anybody wants follow up, they can email us, and we'll make those connections happen, because that's great work. And actually, you dive right into my next question, which was because we were talking about misallocated food, but yet we've had an ongoing problem of food insecurity in this country. The USDA reports 11% of American households deal with food insecurity at some point throughout the year. Maybe continuing with what you were just saying, and Peter, perhaps you could start. And I know in New York, de Blasio has started these grab-and-go food stations. What are you seeing in terms of feeding vulnerable people?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just to reiterate a point I made before, I think one of the things that has really struck me about this is how much it shines a light on people's differing circumstances. And for some people, this is a time of Zoom happy hours and, online DJ dance parties. And for others, it's a time of, wringing your hands and wondering where your next meal is coming from. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important for people to be really mindful of that. And I mean, I think for me, what I've seen that's been inspiring, is the food bank for the city of New York has been gathering some good resources there. And they have a good website where you can locate food if you're looking for it. And then, otherwise, I can't really reiterate enough how much I think that making calls to Congress people is one of the most important things you can do right now.
Yeah, and we'll dive into that on one of our on Mondays. We have our Take Action series, but yeah, you bring up a good point, because hopefully we will, from this, take a look at food waste and mismanagement as it ties to vulnerable food insecure communities. I'm gonna take now. Thank you to all who submitted questions when they got the email announcements about these town halls, and so I'm going to present a question from the Brooklyn-based artists Lisa Marie Ludwig and Emily Schell of the collective Microbes, who were scheduled to participate in the the Physical Art and Social Activism Spring Festival. And tangential to what we were just talking about, they were curious, how are people with dietary restrictions and food allergies being impacted by the current situation, and what is there anything that you can point to that's specifically being done to support these people dealing with food allergies and food dietary restrictions?
I think there's a lot happening out there with the food and dietary restrictions. I know that at the end of the day, there's still a chef, there's still someone who cares, somebody who understands food, who's making that food. So whether it's the partnerships with the hospitals or feeding the elderly, they are taking that into consideration when they're procuring food. And honestly, fresh produce is the most prevalent thing in the market right now. When this happened and everyone went on a panic buying, you saw macaroni and bread and frozen stuff flying off the shelf, and you saw those produce aisles completely stocked full. My sister is the regional buyer for Whole Foods New England, and she is so flush with produce that's the number one thing that and Whole Foods is honestly doing a great job right now with how they're handling things, at least from what I'm seeing on her side. That's a lot of what's getting flooded into these markets. And so you're actually seeing those prepared meals in many cases be more full of fresh ingredients than they ever were before, because all the panic buying went into people buying Kraft mac and cheese and ramen and crazy stuff, right? So things that were making it into the boxes that weren't good for patients are actually now harder to get. And so there's a little bit of that going on.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point of view. It's totally true. I mean, people with the panic buying, and I guess
people think folks are in there sneezing on all the produce and going, they're like, I don't know, maybe somebody touched that melon, I don't want to touch it. And so you're watching, carts of avocados rot out there, which I think is going to be a good thing for the way that we present groceries in the future, which will also reduce waste.
Yes.
You don't need to look that abundant. People don't respond to that anymore.
Yeah, and potentially this is helping some people to incorporate more healthy eating into their lifestyles because it's more available in the supermarkets, which I guess can bring us to our next question, sort of to end on a positive note. I don't know if you've seen this, but I've been hearing a lot of people say, oh, there's going to be post-isolation corona babies. And do you see sheltering in place leading to corona chefs? And are either of you cooking or baking at home?
Not to get too personal, but I'm really hoping to get my wife pregnant during this time. We were talking before, and I believe if this can happen, I mean, anything's possible, right? So.
Oh, that's great. And baking at all?
I was just going to say that I'm actually advising Pinterest right now on a few recipe projects, and there's just a huge amount of activity right there on Pinterest right now with people looking up recipes, and people looking for things to cook, and for those who again have the means to be home and cooking, this is definitely a golden era. I mean, and in terms of also finding ideas too, because you're seeing chefs putting up things on social media, and it's not tweezer food. It's the stuff that you're making that you actually want to eat in your pajamas on your couch. I think it's a really exciting time for home cooking in that sense. Again, for those who have the means to do that. I can only hope that it'll stick afterwards. And probably the biggest thing I would hope that almost on a more philosophical level that people can hold on to after this is, setting aside the hardship that this is causing, which is considerable. It's, I would say, a healthy reminder of scarcity and the value of things. I mean, I remember when I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Central Africa, if I wanted to get green beans, I had to go out to the field where I was growing green beans and get them. If I wanted to get fish, I had to go fish for them. If I wanted water, I had to go to the well and pull out the water. And I had 3 boxes of macaroni and cheese. I held on to just treasure, and would break out for special occasions when I wanted to treat myself. And I think what struck me coming back to the US after that experience was just that at a certain at a certain level, if you're middle class or up, basically in a lot of ways you're like a god. You can imagine something you want, and then you can have it, and it can be anything. It can be a book, it can be a mango, it can be any ingredient you can think of. You can just sort of wave a wand and it's there. Mm-hmm. And while that's really nice to have, I think it really, when you have that power, you don't really appreciate anything to the same level. And now, we can still access a lot of things, of course, but I think we're at least a little more aware of what happens when you can't get flour, you can't get yeast, or things like that. And
so you have, you're having sort of a lot of inventive recipes, and that will benefit us in the future of sort of preparing and strengthening us. Totally. And just scrolling through Instagram, myself, I just happened to see a lot of delectable meals being shown off, and so I hope that it inspires a lot of future people to go into the industry, and that we come out of this with recognizing how important it is to our economy and to our souls and to our communities. I see one question, one additional question has come in. Can you talk about how our healthcare system impacts the restaurant workers? I guess we spoke a bit about how the restaurant industry is delivering food to hospitals, I'm just curious if the healthcare system is impacting restaurant workers with the lack of healthcare and so forth. I mean, it's really so unfortunate the lack of benefits that the restaurant industry and health gets in that sense.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing more than anything is folks understanding that it's just not, you just can't not have them anymore. And so in addition, but then we say, well, restaurants can't afford them. And the fact is, the way that we were doing business as restaurants was very broken. And it was made in a very sort of put together way and then held to, and things like waiters make $2 because they make tips or they don't get health insurance, but you wouldn't even dream of that in another company. The way that it was put together didn't work. And in some ways, this is a very great equalizer. So what we're equally advocating for in regards to what needs to happen now, right, with CARES and with funding and with the stimulus and with unemployment and people being able to access those things. I think you see one of the things we hear a lot is, well, the servers are going to make more on unemployment than they ever made working for the restaurant. And I'm like, isn't that crazy? Isn't it crazy that the government we have that, regardless of your stance, we're not super happy with overall, believes that these people deserve more money than what they earn working? That should set the bar for you at what the government considers a living wage. And a government that doesn't consider people deserve anything thinks they deserve more than what they get working 8 hours a week in a restaurant. So what we're equally advocating for is people understanding the cost of dining out, understanding that these are real jobs for people. This isn't something that they did because, whatever reason, and that Medicare for all is a really important piece of the puzzle. And that's can sometimes be very divisive with people, but other countries have universal health care, and they have it for exactly this reason, the reason that we never thought would happen. Well, now it happened. And there's no going back or denying the fact that, 7 million Americans didn't have insurance before, and now they don't have insurance and they could get very, very sick. Yeah. And so what does that mean? And so part of what we're advocating for is the inclusion of breaking down the way the insurance companies are set up right now, rebuilding it so that there are options for mom and pop businesses, restaurants, other low margin industries to be able to provide basic medical care as the right of every citizen is truly not on the employer, but more on the government that they pay their taxes to, that they don't get the full reward from. And so that's something that we are equally very, very, I think we have a better platform now than we ever did for that conversation.
Yeah, and I just underscore, I think, it's crazy that we're simultaneously having one of the greatest healthcare crises of our lifetimes at the same time as there are more people than ever worried about losing their access to healthcare. And those two things together is just absolutely tragic.
Well, yeah, I knew that I felt that this conversation, the restaurant industry would serve as a platform to discuss a broad range of social justice topics. So I guess let's take a moment to imagine when this all passes, what is one of the restaurants or meals that you're so looking forward to when we can go dine out?
Oh, I already know what mine is. I was so ready. Okay, so I live here in Brooklyn, New York, but my absolute favorite restaurant in the whole world is Brewery Bavana and Bita Manda in Raleigh. If you've never been, I strongly, strongly suggest you give it a try. They make their own beers, and they're all named things like Glean and Sprout, and they're just the most authentic, wonderful Laotian brother-sister team that runs that restaurant, and they have this pork belly soup that when you eat it, you are healed. Like it's so just, it's like a special moment you get to have with. And I have talked to Van, the owner of that restaurant, so many times, and he like sent me beer one day to cheer me up. But I'm like, I cannot wait to like go buy that soup and like tip that waiter and like be in that room. Like that's what I'm looking forward to.
They are magical experiences.
Oof.
Peter?
Yeah, I also know exactly what I want to do.
Yeah.
I am taking the F train to Coney Island. I'm going to get 2 Nathan's hot dogs, maybe 3, sauerkraut and mustard, big beer, crinkle cut fries, and sit my ass on the beach, just like with my family, just close my eyes, take in the sun, and eat those hot dogs, and then hop on the Cyclone.
Oh,
Done.
wow. Those sound summer dreams for all
Epic
of us
journey.
to look forward to. Well, thank you so much for that. I hope we're able to get to that point in just a few weeks or months. That brings us to the end of today's town hall, and I want to thank all the people. A round of applause for our speakers today, please. And thank you to the art and social activism community for standing behind us and participating. As I mentioned earlier, I think you've shared your organization's websites. I encourage everybody to support them. They are nonprofits. And if you need any information, contact us directly at nicholas@artandsocialactivism.com. But thank you, everyone, for joining in today, and we look forward to seeing you online for the rest of the festival. And
thank you so much, Nick, for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Be safe.